Hey, Internet.
Oh, they have the internet on computers now.
Welcome to Worldview Everlasting, your favorite YouTube addiction.
This episode of Worldview Everlasting is brought to you by the letter Awesome, the numbers Sweet Action, and Issues Etc. Talk radio for the thinking Christian. IssuesETC.org.
And it is time for... We're going to jump right in. We're continuing this week, finally back into the Lectio Continuum, moving through the book of Luke and picking up all of those stories and or bits of teaching that we skipped over during the festival portion of the church year. And we're running right out of last week's text, which was Luke chapter 7, verses 1 through 10, into Luke chapter 7, verses 11 through 17. And remember, all of this is building on Jesus having had said from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah that he is the one who the Spirit of the Lord is on to proclaim the gospel as well as to set prisoners free and heal the sick and cast out demons. That's what he's been doing. He then has set up this Sermon on the Plain parallel to the Sermon on the Mount, starting with these beatitudes, these blessings, proclaiming that in him, blessed are all the people who the world would never think are blessed. The poor, the hungry, the mourning, the hated. Why? Well, because A, that's who he is, because he's God and we are sinners who hate him, and so he is suffering that, and he's bringing us into that as a connection with his cross by which he will redeem the world. So there's that whole side of it. And then there's the fact that, well, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven because he can't see his need. And so it is you who are poor, hungry, mourning, hated, who see the fruit of sin in this world and so are able to hear that precious gospel about who Jesus is and what he's done for you, yeah? Coming out of this then, he has proceeded to do precisely what he just said and bless those mourning, those hated, those who are not making sense. So there's this Gentile who's actually beloved by the people because he's been good, but he's still a Gentile. Unclean, and all that kind of stuff. Whose servant is about to die and Jesus heals him. That was last week. Now we're going to have it again. Jesus is going to do another healing of one who's not about to die, but is dead. So there's also this mounting reality that Jesus, in his warfare against darkness, is coming face to face, not just with demons, not just with illness, but with death itself. And this is huge. So that today, particularly this very important word, egero, to literally stand up, to get up again, but really to mean to rise from the dead in the context. This word is going to be introduced twice, and it's the second time as this foreshadowing, this hint of what's going to be coming next. Interestingly enough, what happens immediately after today's text is that John the Baptist sends his disciples to Jesus to ask him if Jesus is the one who they have been waiting for. Now, why might he be asking this? I mean, where is John the Baptist right now? He is in prison because Herod has put him there, and he knows Jesus has read from this scroll of the prophet Isaiah that he's there to heal the sick, to preach good news to the poor, to bring recovery of sight to the blind, and, oh interesting, to set the captives free. Now, Jesus sends back in response to John, tell John what you see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised. Poor have the good news preached to them. So blessed is the one who is not offended by me. But what about the captives, Jesus? Oh, John, yeah, captivity from sin, death, and the devil. Not temporal, necessarily. You know this, yeah? Hoo. Interesting stuff, ain't it? But capsulated in the middle, then, is this text from today, which is one of my favorite stories about Jesus. If you want to talk like Bible story format, this is the showdown. Well, pre-cross showdown, but this is the, like, light versus darkness, armies of goodness versus armies of evil. Convoluted, cataclysmic conflagration and confabulation. Wrought and told with mythological-like significance. Not that it's a myth, but it's what all myths wish they could be. And it starts out plain enough. Soon after having healed this servant of the centurion, Jesus comes into a town that's called Nain. And he's not alone at this point. He has not just his disciples, his apostles, whom he has given authority to do miracles to. He also has this massive crowd following him. I mean, this is a camp movement. There are people just traveling with him, huge numbers. And they're all descending on this little tiny town town called Nain because they're all just wanting to get a glimpse of Jesus and see what he's going to do next. So you can imagine this little town out in the middle of Judea and this big crowd of people walking over the hills down into the town, right? But then, behold, and check it out, idu in the Greek, idu, as they are drawing near to the gate through the wall to this town, this army of light following the Savior of the world runs into another massive crowd, this an army of darkness. And no, I don't mean zombies.
Hey, I just heard that.
Excuse me.
Behold, a young man, a youth, who had died, was being carried out, surrounded by the crowd of the town in deep mourning with him, because this youth was the only son of a woman who also was a widow. So now she is being left all by herself, and this whole ancient world funeral procession is taking place in which they're wailing and screaming and pain and suffering is being just let unleashed. You know, as Americans, we sit here and we're like, oh, I'll shed a tear and like try really hard to hold it inside and not admit that I'm feeling pain and that I hate death, because of course we've been telling each other for so long that death is just a gateway and evolution is really not that big a deal and it's great, blah, blah, blah. Well, but then we see the pain and it's just... So anyway, they're letting it out, you know. War cries of mourning coming forth, just pouring out of this little town. So one great crowd following Jesus, waiting for miracles. Another crowd going forth in doom and great darkness. And don't miss this little reality going on in the midst of the text. This man is a monogenes huios, and only... begotten son of this widow. Oh, I've heard that language somewhere before. So they run into this only begotten son, locked in the pangs of death, with the army of mourning moving out toward to encapsulate and clash with this crowd following the light of the world, Jesus himself. And beholding her, not him, but her, the mother, the mourning, lost widow, the helpless, the weak, the poor, the hated, the Lord, Hakirios. And now you run into this word that's really hard to translate because it's just like so amazing. He has his spleen fall out of his side onto the ground and lie there flapping like a dead fish. That is, he can't even say it.
Splachnidsteis, he has compassion on him.
I'm useless. I am just generally useless.
Splachnidsteis.
He esplanchthnithsays. Now, we would say his heart went out to her, but it sounds so weak when we say it that way. I mean, this is like his very bowels are gushing from himself in pain and torment for her.
Splachnidsteis.
He has mercy upon her. He empathizes with her pain and desires to fix it. So his mercy just falls out of himself at her, and he says to her, cry out no more. Now, weep not. That's kind of weak again, too, because they're wailing, they're screaming, they're crying out in pain. He says, silence, cry not tears, voice. And coming to them, he touches the bier, the coffin, the place which holds the dead body, which in Hebrew culture, this is a big no-no. I mean, if somebody near you dies, you got to take care of it, and then you're unclean for like a certain set of days, and you have to go through all this ritual process to be made clean again. So, you know, you maybe would follow along in a funeral procession, but there's no way you're going to go near and touch the death. Death is unclean. Death is bad. It makes evil things happen. You just don't do this, Jesus. But he does. He goes in and he touches the bier because, if you remember, similar to the time when he heals a leper and touching the leper, which ought to make him unclean, in reverse, has this amazing effect that because he's the Son of God, the only begotten one, the cleaner of the world, the clean goes into the dirty. It all reverses and goes the other way. The dirty doesn't rub off. The clean rubs off from Jesus and cleans that leper. Well, just so now, he touches the bier of death and it cannot impact him with uncleanness. And to prove that point, he's going to actually just make the death go away altogether. So the ones who are carrying it stop as soon as he does this, rightly so. They're like, whoa, what are you doing, dude? And then he says, young man, I say to you, dead boy, eger theta. There's that egera word. Stand up, rise. Now, you know, normally anybody who would try this, we would call them insane. But then, since he is the only begotten Son, the real and only begotten Son of the Father in heaven, the dead one, ha-nekros, sits up and he begins to speak. Well, blimey, how did I get here? And he, Jesus, gave him, the dead man who's not dead anymore, the unclean thing who's been cleaned by Jesus flowing out, to his mother. What happens next? Well, fear takes them all. The whole crowd is just like, didn't expect that. And they begin to glorify God, that is, confess that this is an act of God, saying, a great prophet has, is, now here's the key, don't miss this one, egerthe. That's that egero word. A great prophet has arisen among us. Now, they have no clue what they just said and how right they are. They think he's just a great prophet and he's just shown up, but they are typologically even now, foreshadowingly even now, confessing what Jesus is in fact here to do. Not raise a dead boy who's just gonna die again a few years later, but rise from the dead himself, the only begotten Son who conquers death once and for all. Yeah? So they say a prophet has risen and God has visited us, which is also Old Testament speak for salvation. Whenever God visits his people in the prophets especially, or says, I'm going to visit you, it means he's coming to save, which all the more then connects this visitation and resurrection reality into the heart of what Luke is aiming towards through Jesus' own prophecy that he is here to proclaim this good news and set captives free, not by letting John out of prison, but by defeating sin and death and the devil in his own glorious resurrection. And the word of this Jesus begins to spread even more than it already has throughout all of Judea and into the neighboring regions. Yeah? Oh, battle of light and darkness. Prototypically foreshadowed. It was a strange and dreadful sight when light and dark contended on that cross. Here it happens before its time, letting you know that there is an only Son who is capable of doing more than leaving the world in mourning and hunger and poverty and pain, but bringing the very opposite of that. Sight for the blind, health to the sick, egero, resurrection to the believer. Yeah? Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time. And, this is a regular service announcement for the Lutheran Ninja Clan. Worldview Everlasting is a production of Worldview Everlasting Television, made possible by the Lutheran Ninja Clan. You too can be a ninja for a mere $5 a month. Consider checking out our PayPal donation button and make this more than it already is. Big plans coming forward. We have an important meeting in the next couple of weeks to discuss the future of Worldview Everlasting Television, and we look forward to telling you more. Meanwhile, your monies are not going to waste. We are so thankful to have Peter here working to edit. Hopefully you've seen the difference.
Look at that monkey!
Also, we have a next month upcoming event, Worldview Everlasting interview with Chris Roseborough, Pirate Christian Radio. Definitely going to be a good time. So anyway, all right. Rock on.
I used to be a cow.